Right, I think I have it up.
Good evening.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
How's everybody?
Doing well.
Good. Good to see everybody tonight. Alrighty. Well, Dr. Maraglia, I was at Wilbur's Saturday night.
I'm surprised I did not. And I was down that way Saturday night. I'm surprised that you didn't want to tease me about it.
Ah, I was give out from the heat. I got there Friday. It was about 100 and the index was about 105. Same on Saturday. That cooled off on Sunday, though, thank goodness. But
Well,
it
it's
was
still cool
miserable.
here.
We were in we were at the community college there at Wayne, and we were in the Dogwood building up on the second floor, and it was, I don't know, about 85 degrees in our classroom, and we had to stay all day. It was miserable.
That's like a terrarium.
Yeah, it was hot and steamy, but it's a nice facility. That's we have a facilities book. That's 740. Um, that's for my docs in, the last course blocks is facilities and finance. And I asked them how they thought the building that we were in, and they said, "Oh, it's a nice building, really well done. It's only about five. Building was built in 1991." I said, "This is the same furniture and carpet I picked out when we built on to Olympic High School when I was principal there in the 90s." But it's nice because they don't have any students. We didn't see a soul the whole weekend,
Oh my
not
goodness.
one. Didn't see one person the whole weekend. They didn't
Well,
have any classes or any events. And then during the week, there's nobody there during the day.
well, I'm just used to Wayne Community, their old building.
Yeah,
Um, because they built that one long after I had moved away. Courtney, be safe.
yeah,
I saw your message that you're
yeah.
driving.
And you're driving. Don't pay attention to the road. Don't run off the road. We'll wait on you. So our evidence stars of the week who are now working on task three of the OMA are Kayla, LaFaith, Raquel, and Courtney. So congratulations. I read all your discussion board posts, but I'll let Dr. Maraglia. She spends more time with those than I do. I thought I saw a star in that, but we'll let her. Who was your star of the week for discussion board posts about legal liability?
Well, and I don't want to I'm not saying this because I've only seen Kayla's tonight, but Kayla, I really liked
I
that
did.
you specifically referenced when if there's an issue that the courts are going to look at negligence. The negligence is the key issue, and there is sort of twofold. Did you breach your duty of care? And did that breach of duty cause harm?
Hmm.
And then you also ended by saying that it may seem like a lot, but it's not optional. Taking care of your students, your staff, the people in your building is not optional. And that's not only a legal perspective, but it's also a moral perspective. You've got to take care of your folks. So I really appreciated that you pointed that out. I mean, you just really nailed it on the head.
Yep, that was the one that caught my eye as well. You have that in loco parentis that Dr. Maraglia mentioned last week, that in loco in place of the parent in Latin. None of y'all are old enough to have to take it in high school like I did, but that's what it means that you serve in place of the parent for the kids, but you also have a responsibility to the people that you lead, and that's Psalm 23 or um, it's also Peter, being the good shepherd. That's your responsibility. That's why we harp on you about things like propping doors open or having broken doors that you don't follow up on. A report came out since we met last about Uvalde, Texas, that they it looks like that they've been filing maintenance requests for years that had been ignored there. So there's going to be more punishment doled out in that case, even still after all these years. But that's what we're talking about. Just filing a report is not enough. You need to follow up. You have to go to the hardware store and buy a lock yourself. It's exactly what I would do if I had a safety issue like that. You have that responsibility. And remember, negligence has three parts: misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. Misfeasance is you did the wrong thing, you didn't know, but you had a duty and you did the wrong thing. Nonfeasance, you had a duty to act and you didn't do anything. Or then, malfeasance is you knew it was wrong, you did it anyway. Um, and so that leads me to a quick story. I was doing an audit and found a kid that wasn't a student at the school locked in the boiler room. His dad was the custodian and had was the custodial parent, and that kid they were in a neighboring district and they were out of school that day. So he slipped his kid in and locked him in the boiler room. We end up changing principles over that one. Again, she didn't know, but she had a duty to know, um, and to not allow unsafe things like that to happen. We got sued. The parents, the mother who was involved, she sued us, and we had to settle with her over, endangering her child. So it did not go well. So that's the kinds of things that we're talking about. You have enough problems without compounding them by not following through, having a duty to act and not doing that. So we don't have a we didn't have a another discussion board this week because it was case study week, but I do want to look at the upcoming discussion board. So let me share my screen.
While you're doing that, Dr. Lamb, I think that's a really great point, what you said about being the good shepherd. And we tend to think about physical safety, but I think as we get into our case study tonight, we're going to see that safety is not just physical safety,
Hmm.
but mental, emotional, every aspect of humanity that you've got to think of yourself as being the shepherd that's going to take care of your people in every possible way.
Yeah, because I'm going to ask you at the end of your presentations this evening what you're going to do with this teacher. I mean, what is the line that you can't allow the people in your building to cross when it comes to harming children? I mean, is it just going to be physical and sexual, or are you going to, are you, but what is it that you just won't allow? What is the standard going to be for your building when you're a principal? That's what we're going to ask. All right, so coming up for next week. Observe a student due process in a school report. What surprised you the most about the process? If you can set in a discipline incident would be best. And generally, what people tell us what surprises them is how long and how it takes and how thorough it has to be to make sure that the kids' due process rights have been upheld. That you can't just breeze through them because there's no minor case. The one that you don't think anything of is the one you'll get sued over. So do that. The other is interview an AP or other school disciplinarian that does process discipline. What are their biggest concerns about pressing disciplinary incident? What system of discipline guides their decision making? Do they use a code of conduct? Do you have PBIS? Do you have discipline? What system do you have beyond the code of conduct for your district? It's going to be important to know that and that you're consistent again so that you're not arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary being that you punish one kid too much and then you don't punish the next kid enough, or you let one off and you process the other one, or you're capricious. You give them way too much punishment for the crime that they committed. Now, that leads us to tonight's case. The teacher assigned too much punishment without due process to this kid. So let me let me make sure that again we cautioned you last week. This is not a case of the principal did something wrong, the superintendent did something wrong. The kid turned in his brother's homework assignment. Is that really an academic issue, or is that just something that we ought to handle as a disciplinary? Charlotte-Mecklenburg Code of Conduct says if for that, and we could pull it up, says that the most you can give them is 1 day of ISS. By failing a kid, you've taken a whole year. You've excluded a kid for a year, and the law is very clear. It's still a zero tolerance illegal suspension. of a kid's rights, even if you allow him to go to summer school. That's not the issue. Oh, he can go to summer school. This is not about baseball and summer school. You can't put a kid out a year without due process. And nowhere in the handbook does it say that for a kid turning in his brother's homework assignment. So let me show you what the state guidance is on grading. This is from the State Board of Education, and every district has to adopt this. It's supposed to be in your faculty handbook that's covered legally that first required work day. Your principal is supposed to cover this with you in terms of the state grading scale. So let me share my screen and I will show you that. Let me go through the legal chain here. All right, in North Carolina, to get precise details on how homework, projects, schoolwork are weighted, you need to consult your local school district's grading policies. They can be found on there. It's required that they do that. A snapshot here, and it says on this school district even says teachers cannot adjust it. It tells them, no, we've said it. You leave it alone. They must have had problems with the same thing as we had tonight, right here. Cannot adjust it. Practices or procedures. Cannot do that. They probably had the same problem. Some teacher went rogue. And here is the state guidance right here. Classwork and class assignments, 40%. State assessments, 30%. Application of learning, that's classwork, and class assignments, 20. Homework's 10%. That's aggregate for the year. You cannot go outside of that. Now, some districts have opted, you can go down as low as 20% on state grading. But if you do that, you must have a district policy that you're doing quarterly grading, and that would count 10%. But state assessments, whether it be the end of grade, SC ready, end of course, can only count 30%. The state lays out the weighting on these things. Now, tonight's case, the teacher took one homework assignment, made it count more than 50% of the yearly grade so that she could fail Bobby. No due process, violated state law, violated federal law on a zero tolerance expulsion, violated local board policy. So we have a violation of federal law, zero tolerance law. You can't just put a kid out with no due process. Violated state grading policy, violated the local policy on grading. That's what we're talking about here. That's what the teacher did. You can't just arbitrarily, as a teacher, say this homework assignment counts more than 50% of the yearly grade. That's more than the state exam. That's crazy. How would you like to be sitting in a courtroom and try to defend that action? I mean, people off the street would know. You can't count a homework assignment for more than half the yearly grade and fail a grade for the kid for the whole year. He loses a whole year of his academic progress. And that's what Dr. Maraglia was talking about. Not just protecting your kids physically and from outside threats, but from things like this. I mean, he could have brought a gun to school and got less punishment than this. A whole year out for turning in his brother's homework assignment. When the handbook on cheating, and we can pull that up right quick. Let me do that. Let me share my screen. Let me go back to ours. I had the case pulled up, but won't need it. Let me go back and start again here. Let me pull up. Student Code of Conduct. I think it's number.
I used to could tell you right off the top of my head,
I think it's number 6.
even though I didn't have a ton of cheating in my career, but I could tell you what the rules were. But you know what? That has kind of trickled out of my brain in the last
All right.
few years.
So it's a tier 1. So let's look at tier 1 first. The most punishment is 1 day of ISS, as you can see. It's a level 1 infraction. So here we go. attendance, medication, student dress, personal property. Here we go. I told you it was number 6. Misrepresentation, cheating, level 1. 1 day of ISS. He got put out for a whole year. What does the handbook say? 1 day of ISS. Do you think that might be capricious, a little bit more punishment than the law allowed? That's what we're talking about here. The manipulation of that, something like that, way more punishment. That's the very definition of capricious. Oh boy, I would not want to be in the courtroom when that one hit. This is one of those that we would try to settle long before, because the news media got a hold of that. Boy, we'd all have egg on our face if we did something this crazy. And so that's the notion here, is this violates federal law, zero tolerance expulsion. You didn't give him any due process. You just said you're out for a year. That's what an expulsion is, out for a year, whether it's failing or disciplinary. State policy, you just saw it on the weighting of the grading. Local policy. So, at the end of the day, this is a teacher who tried to harm a child. What are you going to do now, hero? Because what does 115C288A say? Who actually assigns the grade? Is it the teacher? No, that would be you as the principal. 115C288A, to grade and classify pupils. All right, we're ready for our presentations. We're right on time. We normally do a little opener for about 15 minutes. So we've got 2 presentations tonight. We'll go with group 1. Who is group 1? Raquel, LaFaith and Raquel. Somebody share their screen and let's go. I've reviewed both of your. I saw you uploaded both of them into the grading shell. I've looked at both of them. I've got my notes written down to ask questions. Let me turn my camera off. See if that'll help with the video loading. There we go.
Hold on. All right, so our case study focused on Bobby, me, LaFaith, and Tamika. So we did an overview. Principal Tim Davidson was discussing an incident with Dean Larson regarding a situation with Miss Barton's student, Bobby Henson. He admitted to copying his older brother's Mark's assignment due to baseball commitments. Miss Barton intended to fail Bobby for cheating, as the project counted more than half of the final grade, and she was referencing the school handbook that stated, as part of the school policy to maintain standards of personal honesty, cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher.
All right, so right there, let's stop there. Does that mean that you can fail the kid for the year, or can you fail the kid on the assignment?
On the assignment.
That is correct. How do we know that? Well, because federal law says you can't fail a kid for the year. It has to be just on that assignment. That's what zero tolerance means. So it may require a failing grade on that project. But now, my question is this. If we gave Bobby a failing grade on that assignment, and of course it can only count 10%, all of them together can only count 10%, could we still give him the 1 day of ISS? If we failed him on the assignment, could we give him 1 day of ISS as well?
That's doubling the punishment.
That would be double jeopardy. That is correct. Yay!
Hey.
Somebody read the book. I love it. Continue.
All right, then complicating the situation, Bobby's uncle, Mr. Michaels, he's the president of the local chamber of commerce, and he also is on the school board. So during the meeting, Ms. Scott and the union representative for the teachers accompanied Ms. Barton and reminded Mr. Davidson that Bobby and his mother signed a letter acknowledging they were aware of the consequences, basically, of the handbook.
Was this
So
really about the handbook? No, that was
no,
just kind of a smokescreen, because the crux of the case is she assigned more than 50% of the yearly grade for one homework assignment.
Uh-huh.
So the whole notion of who his, some of these cases stuff is thrown in just to confuse you. Does it matter who his uncle is or any of that other stuff? No. Does it matter that they signed a letter acknowledging that they got the code of conduct? No. The grading scale was manipulated by the teacher illegally. Federal, state, and local guidelines were violated by her doing that. So you got to know your law. You got to know your policy. You got to know what your responsibility at that first work day as principal, that required work day. When you go over the faculty handbook, this is this kind of stuff that you've got to cover. This, we're on a 10-point grading scale in North Carolina. A is 90 to 100. You got to make sure they understand that. Some of them will try to slip that 7-point grading scale. A kid will have a 92 and they'll give them a B. You got to watch that kind of stuff, and you got to watch how they set up their grade book. It's online now. You got to monitor how they set their grade book up, and it must follow the district's guidelines and their policy on the weighting of the grading. That's up to you to follow to make sure that you cover that with them, because that's the most complaints you're going to get in school is over grading, especially in the high school where valedictorian, salutatorian, college scholarships are on the line. Oh my Lord, somebody's in your office every day about grading in high school.
And athletics too.
Oh boy, and
If you
athletics.
don't have that GPA, the coaches are going to be having a fit.
Oh yes, absolutely. You're going to get more scrutiny on grading than any other academic issue. Let me say that again. You're going to get more scrutiny on grading than any other academic issue. You better make sure that you cover it completely. And it doesn't matter that you did it I would do it again at the work day in the middle of the year and remind them, we have policies here. You must follow these policies. Otherwise, we all going to be in court and lose our house. I love you, but I can't support you when you do something wrong. I'll support you when you do something right. But when you do something wrong, I can't support you doing something illegal. And remember, nobody can give you permission to break the law. That's how it works. All right. And so now, why didn't the superintendent tell the principal what to do?
I can't remember exact words, but basically he was saying it's his decision.
Yeah, because why did the superintendent tell him that? Was the superintendent abrogating his responsibility? No. Superintendent knows what is the law. The law says the principal does that. Can the superintendent tell him what to assign? Absolutely not. We have a lot of students who get confused on that. Well, why didn't the superintendent? But the superintendent's not allowed to deal with it. Only the principal can grade and classify students. Superintendent cannot weigh in on that one. And he just told him, be careful. It's a highly sensitive case, but you have to make the call based on the law and the policies. That's exactly what the superintendent will tell you. That's what I used to tell principals. This is on you. I'll support you as long as you follow the law. But you better do your due diligence and find out. In this case, we have a clear case of no due process and a very capricious punishment. Now, you mentioned baseball commitments. That's why I have the high school athletic handbook. If I've had students say, well, maybe the school is at fault here for him having to practice too much. No, the school has complete guidelines from middle school through high school on practice, in season, how much time, all of those kinds of things. And you have a person that you hired to make sure that they're enforcing that. Now, if you've got a coach that's gone rogue, you better have found it out before something like this comes up. Now, the school can't be held accountable for travel ball. Now, you know that a lot of kids are involved in travel ball of all kind nowadays. They leave early on Friday and don't get back till Sunday and all those kinds of things. But now that's on the parents and the students. We can't take the responsibility of travel ball. But we are responsible to make sure that our athletic programs are in compliance with the North Carolina handbook on athletics for middle and high schools. That we aren't practicing out of season. We aren't practicing 3 hours in the afternoon or on the weekends or teacher work days or any of those common things that I might have done 50 years ago when I was in that business. I might have done that. But you're supposed to know and not allow that to be done. That's why that handbook is in there. So that you're not doing this to yourself. Very good. Proceed.
All right, so our group focused on two rights of the student, which Professor Long, you hit on right to due process. So when a discipline may affect school attendance,
Hmm.
the student need to be and parents, I guess, need to be known for notice of allegations, opportunity to be heard, impartial decision making, and access to the evidence so it can be challenged. And then we focused on the constitutional right to a sound and basic education, where if he is suspended, the student is also entitled to all those rights as well.
Hmm. That's if he were to be, but in this case, he shouldn't be to start with. But I'm glad you got this slide up. It was announced today, and I had it up a few minutes ago, and we won't go back to it, that the State Board of Education is going to write formally in their policy for, and it'll probably be out mid-year, that school districts cannot fail a kid over attendance. If they do their work, then they get their credit. Again, it supports this notion right here that Raquel's got on the screen, that if it affects school attendance, the state board is going a step further. They're going to legislate and mandate that if a kid passes his work, you can't fail him over attendance, because that would be a violation of his due process and his equal protection under the 14th Amendment. So they're going to have to put that out in schools, because schools are doing that and getting sued and losing. That's why they're responding. Since the pandemic, a lot of kids, their attendance is not as good as it one time was, and districts trying to force attendance are trying to punish kids that way, which is already illegal, but they're trying to do it under the radar. But the state's going to ban it starting probably for second semester. Now, why are schools trying to punish kids for not coming to school, even though they're doing their work? It's not an academic issue, is it? What kind of issue is it? It's a monetary issue.
Financial. Yeah.
Financial. That is right, Diamond. We get paid, we get reimbursed from the state on our state money on the number of kids that attend school every day. So when we talk about finance later this semester, you don't get your money when we allot $8,000 per student. You don't get that 8,000 up front. You get 10 installments of $800 for every kid that you've got. Starts after the first month of school, so you have to have money on hand to start the first month of school. And if you don't, what did Winston-Salem have to do? Rutherford County, some of these districts, they had to close some schools because they didn't have enough money on hand to pay their payroll the first year. After the first month, you have to pay, then the state reimburses you. But what does the state subtract from that $800 per pupil? They subtract your absenteeism. Whatever the percentage is, they take that off the top. So if your absenteeism was 10%, they take 10% of your money. That's why schools are being punitive and trying to punish students and make them come, because they want their money. But that's against the law. If they're passing, then you got to give them their grades. And so, as I said, probably by the calendar year 2026, that will be written into state board policy that you can't fail a kid on attendance.
And I think it's also, schools also view it as trying to punish the parent,
Yep.
or if we're gonna fail the student, that'll make the parents bring them to school.
Yeah.
Especially when you're elementary and middle and the kids can't drive. Okay, well, I'm gonna punish the parent.
Yeah. Yeah. You're costing us money, positions.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, but the kid's the one that suffers. You can't take that out on the kid. I love that you referenced Leandro. We're going to cover that case in school finance in depth later on. But Leandro is the case that we go to on school funding. But it also says that kids get a sound education. You can't deny them that right just because being arbitrary or capricious without due process. Very good. Moving on.
Okay, so we did legal rights of the teacher, academic integrity. Teachers have the legal right to set academic standards and enforce classroom rules, including those against cheating and plagiarism. Support from school policies. Teachers must follow district and school procedures for reporting cheating as long as the teacher is active within policy and does not violate student rights. Their actions are legally supported. The due process requirements. While students have the right to due process, they can respond if somebody says that they have plagiarized work. Teachers are not required to provide a legal hearing themselves. The teacher's role is to document cheating and report incidents to administration, ensuring fairness and consistency. Protection from retaliation or liability. Teachers are generally protected from lawsuits as long as they will act within school policy, follow the school rules, apply consequences fairly, give Bobby a second chance to redo his assignment, and avoid discrimination or arbitrary punishment. And the right to involve administration. If cheating affects eligibility for extracurricular activities, Bobby will not be able to play in the championship baseball game. Teachers can escalate the issue. Teachers have the right to recommend further disciplinary action when cheating constitutes a code of conduct violation.
All right. Why do we call it a disciplinary referral when the teacher sends it? They're making a recommendation. They're referring for an incident that occurred. Do teachers have any legal standing in determining what the punishment is? No, absolutely not. Teachers do not run the hearing either. The school and the school district has a hearing officer that comes out and does the due process hearings when you're looking to put a kid out for a year or even for a 10-day suspension, kid gets a hearing. The district has to run that so that it's not biased. Now, I love the slide in that you're exactly right. The teacher has a duty to report and the cheating as a disciplinary incident, not take the law into her own hand and fail a kid for the year over it. The first thing that I would ask the teacher is, where's the disciplinary referral? You're supposed to refer these to me, not you. You can't handle this on your own. That's against the law. There has to be due process. You write the referral. Um, the administrative team has to be the one that assigns the discipline. See, the teacher in this case, manipulated the law or violated the law and then acted as judge, jury, and executioner on this kid. You cannot do that.
Mhm.
You cannot do that. Since 1969, kids have rights in schools, and this violates a lot of them. And so, yes, the teacher should document this, should turn in a referral. The teacher could handle this one only as well in terms of redoing the assignment, reducing the grade on the assignment, those kinds of things. Or if she wanted to make it a disciplinary instance, she turns it in. But again, as Raquel said earlier, you can't do both. You
Mhm.
can't reduce their grade, give them a 0, and then do a referral for them to get their 1 day of in school suspension as well. You do one or the other. Now, when I was principal, I always encouraged teachers to handle it at their classroom level. Don't send kids out unless you have to. Is this really worthy of a kid being missing his instruction for a day? No. Just have him redo. It's just a homework assignment. It's not like he cheated on the state test. This is a homework assignment. Um, for those of you old enough to remember, and probably nobody but me and Raquel are probably the only two that know this reference. This is like AI said about practice. I mean, this is
Oh, come on. I know this.
you know that when
Of course I
Alvin
do.
Iverson went off on reporters about he missed practice.
Yes.
Something insignificant. Well, I mean, this is kind of my analogy for this case is a homework assignment. Really, you're going to fail a kid for a whole year over one homework assignment? How crazy does that sound? That's what Allen Iverson was talking about. He missed one practice or was late or something, and you're going to kick him off the team for being late for practice. Really?
Are
That's
you
a
going to
little
give up your
excessive, don't you
power
think?
as a classroom teacher? Are you going to give up your power for this.
Yeah. Is this the hill you want to die on? This is nuts. Now, we're belaboring this point because unfortunately, as principals, rarely will you have a semester, much less a year, where you don't have a teacher that just is just fed up with some kid and just takes a shot like this. I hate to say it, but it just happens regularly. It happens regularly. You know, at times I think maybe we ought to go back to like when I was in school, they'd just jerk you up and beat the stuffing out of you every once in a while and get over it and make both of you. You'd do better and they'd feel better and you go on about your business. But since we're not allowed to do that anymore, I think, what we get is little sneaky tricks like this all the time now. Um, that's unfortunate, but it's human nature, folks. I would like to say that we all have a building full of saints, but we don't. And you've got to protect these kids. That goes back to what Dr. Maraglia most appropriately opened us up tonight is it's your responsibility as the good shepherd, not just to take care of them physically, but emotionally, mentally. Don't let their educational rights be taken from them. When you're reading about zero tolerance, one of the things that you should follow up on is the school to prison pipeline. What happens when kids get put out of school on a regular basis and they fail their courses and grades? Where do they generally end up? They end up in prison. It's called the school to prison pipeline. The California dropout program has some of the best literature and the easiest reading on that. I mean, those people have studied it forever. I mean, if you fail algebra 1, there's a 66% chance you won't graduate from high school. I mean, they know things like that. And the general reason why kids fail is getting put out for disciplinary issues. And so I've got 2 dissertations going right now on restorative practices. Districts trying to do those rather than, your go-to move can't be putting kids out of the building. That just can't be your go-to move. That's just putting the kid on that school to prison pipeline. Very good. Moving on.
And here are the 4 ethical paradigms. Paradigms, thank you. Justice, care, critique, and profession. Justice, focus, rules, policies, and fairness. Principal must apply justice consistently across all cases. The principal must follow the law, must follow due process, and standard reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. Care is relationships, compassion, and empathy. More concerned about the complaint. Principal must serve all students. Social pressure from community and student and family. Consider students' intent malicious versus a mistake. Balance accountability with opportunity for growth. Possible restorative measures. Resubmit and attend academic integrity workshops. Critique focus who believes or is disadvantaged by the decision. Policies on plagiarism. Failing grade may disappropriately harm students' future. Must consider whether punishment reinforces inequities. Profession. What does it mean to act as an ethical professional? Principles model integrity, fairness, and high expectations. Maintain credibility with staff, students, and community. Decisions should be upheld in integrity of academic standards while showing leadership.
I think my favorite statement on that slide, if you could go back, was balancing accountability with opportunity for growth. Isn't that what we're trying to do?
Yes.
I mean, they're all important, but that just speaks to me profoundly.
Mm-hmm. Balance accountability for growth, possible restorative measures rather than punitive measures. All right, so LaFaith, you get the first pop quiz of the evening.
Oh Lord.
When I do that interviewing town hall, usually takes about 45 minutes. I talk about the different questions you're going to be asked on the different levels of interviews when you're trying to get an assistant principal job. And the first level consists of data dives and all kinds of things. The second one is a group interview with different stakeholders so that can you speak to parents. But the third level is your professional interviews, usually with the principal, may even have an assistant superintendent in there. And they'll get to talking to you and you get to feeling comfortable and that you can use your jargon where you can talk about EVOS and PBIS. And you can really throw it, you can really spread it on thick. And you get to feeling comfortable like you're with a group of colleagues. And then they ask you a question like this. If there were a policy or a law in your school district that you felt harmed children, would you enforce that law or policy? So the question of faith is, if you felt like a law or policy in your district harmed kids, would you enforce that law or policy?
No, because especially now since I work with exceptional students, so I wouldn't allow a law into the school that will harm them in any kind of way.
Well, say you won't get a job then.
Well, I just won't get the job
That's
then.
what I mean. That is that, and that's why I'm pointing this out. Sometimes there's laws on the books that harm kids, but you're expected, you're hired to follow law and policy. Now, my advice would be is to advocate for a change in that law and policy, and that's how we get things done. Not enforcing it only puts you at legal risk and puts the district at risk, and so that's one of those things. Now it flies in the face of ethical treatment and care for kids sometimes. And so sometimes the law is at odds with this. We always follow the law, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't become advocates for children. That's the notion here. We don't get ourselves in a legal bind or put our district in a legal bind. We become advocates for kids. Um, And so that's the notion here is whether you agree with a policy or not, you should enforce it and become an advocate to get it changed or to amend or become an agent for social change rather than just ignoring the law and putting yourself your livelihood and that the district at a legal risk. And that's one of the things they're going to ask you. Are you going to put us at a legal risk? And if that is the case, um, it's going to be hard to get a job. Uh,
Got it.
you know, don't give up. Don't lose sight of what's right for kids. Do not. Don't lose sight of what's right for kids, but don't put yourself and the district in harm's way over that. It's about risk management. That's what we're talking about here, risk management. This case is really about risk management. This is going to be a loser in court. Understanding that the law wasn't followed here, the law was violated. You can't go along with this. But, thankfully in this case, the teacher is the one not doing the right thing, and you are going behind, and you have to make the decision to do the right thing, to do the legal thing. And the beauty of this case is it's the right thing ethically and the right thing legally. But sometimes they aren't the same. That's my point. Sometimes they aren't the same. This one is the easy case. The right thing and the legal thing are the same thing in this case, but it's not always. But you always have to follow the law. Nobody can give you permission not to follow the law. But that's when you become an advocate for children. And that's what we're expected to be as well. Very good. Moving on.
Okay, so when we looked at the case study, we tried to take Mr. Uncle Michael out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got that. That's not part of it.
That's a
Not part
smokescreen.
of it at all.
hmm but we thought about giving three options. So, especially after meeting with Mr. Larson, Ms. Barton, Bobby's mother, superintendent, we felt like three options may be okay. First one was to allow him to redo the assignment with guidance from Ms. Barton. He would have 10 days. I thought about the 10 days. I kind of wanted to shorten it, but I left it there 10 days to conduct 2 interviews with a civic leader and gosh, it was someone else. I forgot. I'm sorry. I forgot to put that in there. But to write a 5-page research paper on history. He also, during that time, because baseball is what he said, prevented him from doing his own assignment and using his brothers, he wouldn't be able to participate in any of the games and practices. But that, I think, based off of what we said earlier, that's kind of like double punishment. But
Yeah,
I'll move on.
B and C are off the table. You can't do those. A's a good one. I like A. That's a really good one. No, you can't make Bobby. You can't. There is no failing grade. I mean, he can. He's. It's not. He can't be failed for the year and go to summer school. That's off the table. And
Okay.
we can't punish him taking him off the team either unless his unless his grade point average falls below 2.0.
Right.
We can,
And that would happen if she gave him the grade, but she can't do
but you
that.
can't
That's
give
going
him
to
the
be a
grade.
different. Right.
Again,
Right.
that the whole thing is the grade is illegal. It
Right.
violates federal, state, and local. Can't give him that grade. And so really, and I mean, according to this, Mr. Davidson had a difficult. No, this is an easy decision. The grade is illegal. It violates all these laws, federal, state, local, and zero tolerance. It violates all of those. The grade, the failing grade for the year cannot stand. What you tell the teacher you know, either give him the chance to to follow up and do as you outlined here, or write a discipline referral and we'll give him 1 day ISS, but we can't do both. But that's the most that you can do. That's it. There is no he's going to get a failing grade for the year. And now if you
So
want
can
to
we?
reduce his grade on the assignment, but then again, I would ask the teacher to show me the other grades on other homework assignments. Um, you know, you you would have to show me his grade calculation for the year and how that this grade what is this grade now on this assignment and collectively what are his other homework grades so we could calculate what his real grade on homework for the year, and then that's only 10% of his overall grade. What's his other grades, to make sure I would sit down with the teacher in the grade book to make sure that if we got sued over her actions, that we could, at the end of the day, we could show legally how we ended up with his final grade. I mean,
So we can require him to do the assignment over, right?
absolutely. Or you could,
Yeah.
again, you could do that. I would do that. You could legally give him a zero. Um, but the problem with just giving him a zero is according to their policy, he could get a zero on that assignment, but then he wouldn't redo it. There'd be no learning. I mean, that's that balance again. I
Mhm.
mean, the best option is, I love your A right there. That's what you need to do with Bobby. Don't write a referral. Just let him make up the assignment. If he doesn't make up the assignment, you get him a zero and off we go. But
So
now he
can we
only gets a
also?
zero on that assignment, and then
Yeah.
I would want to know, all right, how many other homework assignments did you have, and now show me the grade calculation for homework, and now that's 10%. I'd want to see that grade book to make sure that whatever this, in if you think about it, more than likely this assignment is going to count less than 1% of his overall grade. It can only be 10% for all the homework all year. I mean, how many homework assignments did you give? Is this the only homework assignment you gave all year? That's not good practice either. Um, we could probably defend it legally, but in the court of public opinion, we'd get barbecued over that. So at the end of the day, if this is the only homework assignment for the year, the most that this could hurt him would be 10%. But more than likely, there were others along the way. But that's why, as principal, I would sit down and I'd have to see the grade book. I'd have to make sure that we followed the law to the letter in this case after she tried something like this. Because could I trust her to go back and recalculate the grade properly? No. You can delegate responsibility, I mean activity, but not responsible. Who's responsible for the final grade? You are. Law says you are. 115C288A says you're responsible. Would you trust a teacher to go back and recalculate his grade? No. Mm-mm. So option A is the option that of your options. That's the one you would use. The only other option to that one is write a referral and for cheating, and he comes to the office. We give him 1 day ISS, but that still doesn't really address that assignment. Are you just going to let the assignment go? So A is a really good alternative. That's really good. B and C are not legal. We couldn't do those because again, the failing grade was assigned illegally. Very good.
So, um, due process, substantive, gracious, substantive. Bobby should have been allowed to have his side of the story told. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he told his side though. He said he wasn't able to do the assignment because of baseball. Bobby should have the opportunity to restore his academic character. I think, okay, procedural. The teacher handled the situation in the incorrect way. The
Mm-hmm.
grading policy was not upheld in the district's uniform grading policy. Standards of arbitrary and, how do we say this word?
Capricious.
Capricious. So the definition is a decision is considered arbitrary and capricious if it
Yes.
lacks reasonable basis, ignores evidence, or is inconsistent with established policy. The
Yep.
options provided by Mr. Davidson are reasonable. He is allowing Bobby to make up the assignment with enforcing a penalty that prohibits him from participating in games until the work is completed. Moving forward, Mr. Davidson will need to approach similar situations with the same level of fairness and consistency.
All right. Now you got to be careful on the games. If he's eligible, he gets to play. The only way that he would not be able to play in the game if he is suspended from school. You got to be careful. Again, that's double jeopardy. That's punishing him twice. And I'm gonna tell you right now, again, I was a middle school, junior high, and high school principal in my career. You start messing with playing games, that gets parents angrier than anything else that you do. And there's nowhere in the high school handbook or in North Carolina that you can not allow a kid to participate if he's enrolled in school and he's in good standing. He would have to be declared ineligible or have to be suspended from school in order for you not to allow him to participate.
Or legitimately have a low GPA.
Yeah, that makes him academically ineligible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this one, keep athletics out of this one. Don't ever, and this business of telling coaches to punish kids for their behavior in school, boy, you couldn't be dumber than that. That'll get you sued and fired before you know it. Leave athletics alone. If it's not an athletic issue, don't bring athletics into it. Do not do that. That's a quick loser because you don't have a leg to stand on legally. So you got to be real careful about that. Again, most anything you do, athletics is going to be looked at as double jeopardy that you're punishing a kid twice. So just don't. Just let the athletic part go. That he said that he was busy with baseball is immaterial to the study. He turned in his brother's homework assignment, deal with what he did. And don't bring athletics into it. You should know that if your coaches are following that athletic handbook, you should know if your teachers are following the grading policy that is set by the district from the state. Are they following that? You got to make sure that, again, the substantive part, are we following the rules? And then are we applying them consistently and fairly? Are we carrying it out? In this case, all the rules were in place, but the teacher did not carry them out. Procedurally, we had a teacher that went rogue. And so, is that your last slide? You can stop your
Yes.
share now. All right. So the question is, what are you going to do from Group A, from the all-star team here? What are you going to do with this teacher? Just tell her not to do it again.
I think for me, yes, you got to sit her down, explain the laws so that way.
Do you think she doesn't know the law?
Because I'm just looking at it for me because I'm learning a lot too. I'm like, oh, I didn't know like double jeopardy and all those things. But I think at the end of the day, she can't do that.
Yeah,
She
that's
won't follow it.
exactly right. If you think
And
that she doesn't know, I mean, and I'm picking up. You're right there, Raquel. If she doesn't know the law, who's that on? Whose responsibility is that? Somebody
That's
say
her.
it.
It's
Raquel.
hers. It's hers.
It's her responsibility to know the law. You've got it in the handbook. The state's got it in theirs. The district's got it on their website. It's in the handbook for your school. It's covered at the work days. That's one of the legal requirements. Um, do you have to sit and read them the handbook? No. This is not bedtime stories. This is not, big books and, back in the old elementary whole language where we gathered them around, sat in a rocking chair and read the big book to them. We don't do that. Here it is. You should know this. It's her responsibility to know these things. Don't let her off the hook here. It's her responsibility. If she didn't know, she was supposed to know. So the question is what are you going to do now?
I would maybe even just reiterate to staff
Why are
what
you
the
going to punish everybody? Why are you
well,
going to
not
punish the
punish
many
them.
for the sins of the few? We finally got to one. How many times have you heard announcements over the intercom about being at work on time and you're there every day on time? Don't that make you mad as fire? Put up a note in the workroom about something that I don't do that. Or I do that. If somebody's late, you need to go talk to them. I was here early today. Why am I getting punished? So do not, reiterate this at your normal times, but don't punish the rest of the faculty because she went rogue. Now they won't be sympathetic to you. Now they'll be mad at you because you punished them for what she did. Don't ever do that. If you got a problem with a teacher's behavior, you need to address their behavior with them. Don't just put up notices or make general announcements.
I guess I also don't understand the union, how that work.
That there is no union. That again, that's just to throw you off. That's NCAE. They're not really a union. They want you to pretend. They try to buffalo you and bluff you into that they're a union. They're not. North Carolina, North and South Carolina are right to work states. Those people have zero. I used to run them out just like a stray cat that come in the building. You get out of here. You have no right to be here. Um, that's just so that again, that's a test to see if you know the law or not and know how that works. And that's a great point. North Carolina and South Carolina are right to work states. Teachers cannot unionize. They want to pretend it's a union, but it's not a union. They have an in-serve representative, but they have no status. They have no power. They have no authority. And you can tell them to leave the building if you want to. So back to the original question, what are we going to do with this teacher?
Well, I wrote down a couple of, and I'm not on their team, but I assume we can all chime
Yeah,
in.
yeah, anybody. I want to hear it.
So I wrote down a couple of things. I have served as an AP for 2 years in the district that I'm in, but essentially, I think for the first offense, just because sometimes teachers really don't recognize how big this can go, I would say a formal letter of reprimand would be a good first time. Now, if we decide that somehow, first off, this was intentional or with, some sort of um, malice based on not liking the student or whatever, then we would look at suspension or, probationary status or even a recommendation for termination. But I think before those things happen, I would say a letter of reprimand. And then, of course,
So
going
you're
over.
going with letter of reprimand rather than
Mhm.
a notice of termination and to terminate. All right. So that's kind of your. So you're going with the options are do nothing,
Mhm.
letter of reprimand, move for dismissal. So you're going with letter of reprimand. Now, that's okay. Now me, I would I would want to fire and beat her up, but that's another story. Um,
Can I chime in just because it's late.
Yeah.
Can I go? Okay, so this is where we were when we had our meeting, our Zoom meeting. I also kind of disagreed, and I agree with you more so. Y'all said the extra was kind of like smokescreen. I saw it as intentional.
yeah,
With them speaking about the uncle and and to me it seemed like she wanted to prove a point
yep,
that no, I'm gonna treat everyone equal, and I'm gonna like that was kind of how I took it. So I didn't take it as just extra information within the case study. I took it as her true feelings that come out about this kid, and that's how I took it. So I would probably try to fire her too. But that's just we
yep,
disagreed on that. Me and
Yeah.
we did in the group.
yeah, and I respect that. But one of the things that get back to Kayla's point, we got to be careful about is intent.
Mhm.
We can only judge you on what actions you did or didn't take.
Right.
When we start getting into intent, that's hard to prove in court. Um, but I'm like Diamond. Bob. Now I told you before we started. I'm quite sure Bobby's a turd. That's not a clinical term, but it's accurate. I'd say that Bobby's a pain in the butt because of who his family is, and teachers are only human, and after so much, they take their shot. But the reason that I would just myself move for dismissal, I don't have time to monitor this person. What's she going to do next? Um, I don't have time to watch her and go over her grade book every day and every semester to see what she's going to do next. I mean, as we all know, kids that need love the most usually deserve it the least. You got to find a reason to love children and to protect them and look out for them, and not just their physical well-being. That's what kind of how Dr. Maraglia set this case up tonight, which is the whole notion here. Yeah, nobody's taking Bobby out back and sexually or physically abusing him, but minus that, this is the worst thing that you can attempt to do to a kid. The most we can do to a child is take a year. We call that an exclusion or an expulsion, whether it's academic or discipline. Take the most we can do is take a year from a kid, and even if a kid brings a gun and after a year they get to come back. This is the most we can do. We're going to try to give this kid the most punishment that we can give as a school system for turning in his brother's homework. Think about that for a minute. And we broke federal, state, and local policies to do that. Can you I know that in the era of teacher shortages, but we can't drop our ethical behavior simply because it's tough. Do you want to have to monitor this teacher every day? I'm not trying to talk to you. If you think she should get a letter of reprimand, you're a better person than me. But I'm just not going to deal with this foolishness on an ongoing basis. And I'm going to set the tone that this is not allowable in the school that I'm in charge of. That we're going to look out. We're going to run school for kids, not for the adults that work there. Because that's what this is about. Who are you going to run schools for? Is it going to be for the kids, or is it going to be for the convenience of the adults? If this stands, what will be next? That's the thing. You've got to have some standards in terms of what, lines that you just won't cross or you won't let be crossed. That's just, again, my opinion. All right, that was excellent. I am most pleased. All right, we got another presentation tonight. We're doing well on our time. This one doesn't take near as long. We go, next time Group B goes first. We switch back and forth. All right, who's sharing their screen now?
I will share mine.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, can you guys see this?
Excellent. Raquel, I'm still waiting on you to tell me what you was going to do.
Fire her.
All right, so this is our case study. I am Kayla Baker, and then, of course, Courtney and Diamond were on my team. So just a synopsis of the case study. Really, I don't know that we need to go over it because we've
No, we
talked about
don't.
it. Okay. Okay.
Just hit, just hit the points that you want to bring out.
Okay.
The
So we
second
talked
group
about
always gets, gets the
the
easier
easy
time.
portion. Great. All right. So we talked about due process and then substantive fairness. And so does he have the right to be informed of his charges? Obviously, present his side, which he admitted to. So, that's that. But in terms of the punishment, we did kind of agree that it was not proportionate to the offense. And then we talked about consistency. Have other students in situations been treated the same? And so one thing that we went back and forth on that it didn't really come to our attention, I don't think, until tonight's meeting, was that she had taken it upon herself to modify the grading policy.
Right.
But when I read this initially, I was under the impression that this is the set grading policy for which somehow the principal did not read and review to ensure, that things were aligned. So that kind of changes kind of how we look at things because I didn't realize that extent initially. But we talked about an opportunity to be heard, kind of what the procedural due process or the fair process. And then if we are looking at severe consequences, of course, written notice, a chance to present evidence, and then a formal hearing, which none of those would be necessary based on what our recommendations are. But if that were going to be the case, and then we already talked about that discipline must not be arbitrary or excessive. You've said that. We know that it's serious, but not enough for him to be permanently removed from
Right.
the baseball team. And then we said it should match the school's policy. So again, we know what the school's policy said, and that's why we were a little confused when we talked about this over the weekend. There was a school policy, and again, we were under the impression that she was following what her school had allowed, but not necessarily now. So of course, we talked about what the principal's course of action should be. We said, to confirm that, it was cheating, and we already know that, but check precedent in similar cases and then apply the written code of conduct consistently. Of course, we're going to meet with Bobby and his parents, gather all of the facts, and then align the punishment with the policy and precedent. What we said is for the possible outcome, a failing grade, but not to be half of the final grade. So that's what the case study said, that this particular assignment was half of his final grade. That wouldn't work, but we talked about probation, limited restrictions, but we know that we could not do anything that would be career ending for him, such as failing him in the class or removing him from the sports team. Do you guys want to talk about the paradigms? I don't mind to fly through it, but girls, you just let me know. Okay, I'm just going to go over them. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So the ethical paradigms, ethic of justice, critique, care, and profession. The first one, we know that it requires due process and to ensure that Bobby's constitutional rights are respected. And then in terms of the critique, we talked about who benefits and who suffers from the punishment. So that was another thing that I've been listening to, and we were talking about, and I hadn't considered initially, again, was the teacher being punished for this particular incident. But if he's a student athlete, of course, removing him is disproportionate to the actual offense. And it could likely harm his future, opportunities in terms of sports. And then we asked the question whether or not the punishment was harsher because of his status or because of who he was. And then same thing that the last group said in terms of ethic of care. We wanted to ensure that we know that we make sure that he's held accountable, but that we are also supportive. We know that he is still a student who made a mistake. And that's just kind of, what happens. So even if you're providing mentorship or some sort of academic counseling, rather doing those restorative practices rather than something punitive. And then ethic of profession, same thing. The other group said again, fairness, integrity, and leadership, and just making sure that we're not writing off Bobby's future as a leader, and just being consistent in what we decide to do there. Um, let's see what else. Okay. And so then the summary, basically, we said that we would ensure procedural and substantive due process, avoid arbitrary or excessive punishment, apply the 4 ethical paradigms, and then make sure that we make a balanced decision, whether, there's an academic penalty, but offering support with that and making sure that it's not career ending. And then kind of what we just discussed in terms of the teacher. I know that some people would move to remove the teacher. And I think in certain circumstances, depending on the teacher, how long they've been a teacher, like all of that background would probably play a part in my decision making. Because sometimes, and I can say, like, as a first year teacher, I didn't really look at, like our code of conduct, or, and I was a really big on, I hate it when they brought into schools that no child can make less than a 50. So I'm like, a kid scored a 19 on a quiz and I'm rounding it up to ensure that they don't fail when really they haven't mastered the content. But I understand all that now. But that's kind of what we're thinking. Like I said, a letter of reprimand, or if not, then of course we would move the teacher or remove the teacher. Girls, anyone else want to chime in?
Just, I don't know, I guess maybe give her an action plan was more of,
Yeah, I like that.
yeah.
I
Give her an action plan.
could go for an action plan, because that
Yeah.
puts her on path to termination if she doesn't show
Yeah.
improvement.
Yeah.
I like that better than a letter of reprimand, which is of no value in North Carolina, by the way.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really good, Courtney. The action plan. I've always said I could go for action plan. I want to fire, but I could go for an action plan if I could calm down a little bit. I could go for that.
Well, I know you had stated it. You kind of went in detail with it with the first group, with the athletics part, because being a coach, that was kind of my research portion. And we looked at the NCHSAA handbook with cheating and whatnot, because I mean, even as a coach, I was like, well, wait a minute, did I miss something? But it still only states they only have to pass 75% of their grades, and it's the semester prior to anyway.
Exactly.
So this doesn't even affect him anyway.
There you go. I'm glad somebody finally read the handbook. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, I'm a coach, so I did know that. And I was like, okay, hold on. So I went back and even checked the attendances, that has nothing to do with it.
Exactly.
It's so, because that's 13, well, 12 and a half days, but it's all the semester prior. So even if he were to fail everything right now, we could not do anything until the next semester.
There you go.
Legally, according to Q Tucker and her people.
That's exactly.
So that's kind of where we were.
And Q's the woman. Let me tell you right now.
She from my hometown, so I know.
I've known Q for 40 years, and that's exactly right. That's why I put that handbook. I always have somebody in these classes that are coaches, and they say, "Well, I don't know." And when you read that, then you realize this has got nothing to do with athletics. You can't do anything that addresses athletics because the handbook states that. And so that's truly double jeopardy. If you even mention athletics, you violated the law, because that you cannot bring that in. It's got nothing to do with athletics, got nothing to do with his family. Now, another point, are we, I guess we're done with this one. You can stop your share. Another point that I want to make sure that you understand about due process. Bobby admitted that he cheated, but that's not due process. Listen to me carefully now. You have to inform the student of the charges and the possible consequences before you get their side of the story. Do you think Bobby would have admitted it that easy if you'd told him you're going to fail for the year and all of this other stuff that was coming? Do you think for a minute? So his confession would not be admissible in court. Let me say that again. His confession, because you did not follow the steps. The substance is you have to inform him of the charges first, and then you have to tell him the consequences. There's several things that you have to do prior to getting their written statement. If you did not follow those, anything that comes after that is not admissible in court. His confession would not be admissible in court. Got to remember that. The steps were not followed. The steps are, that's the substance. The procedure is, what did you do? He did not have a hearing. He did not have a presentation of the charges. He was not notified of what the consequences would be, any of that stuff. So his confession is not due process, and it's not admissible. So you got to know what are the steps, and you got to make sure that you're following them. That's what leads us into next week and your activities for the week. As you go watch a due process, are they following the steps? And then you follow up with an interview. What's your concerns about doing due process? And I'll guarantee you, we got 6 in the group. There'll be at least 3 that'll come back and say, being consistent, making sure I follow the steps for consistency and not be arbitrary. The capricious part, because we all use code of conduct handbooks, most everybody can stay within those parameters. The issue is, am I being consistent? Am I not being arbitrary? Am I doing the same thing? Or am I letting my personal feelings enter into Bobby's a turd, so I'm going to hit him harder than Jimmy, who's not? And so that's what leads us into this case, leads us into next week. You now have a critical lens to look at that due process. Did they follow all these steps? Did they gather the evidence? Did they inform the kid of the charges? Did they tell the kid about the consequences? Did they do all these things prior to allowing the kid to tell his story? That's what you're going to be looking for in that due process. That's why I said try to do one on discipline, so that you can see, did they follow these steps when they processed this kid? And then when you talk to them, what are your concerns about this? Generally, it's not so much what punishment that you give, but that you're consistent and you're not arbitrary, and that you give one kid the minimum and one kid the maximum. Are you doing that, or are you being consistent? Are you letting the punishment fit the crime according to the facts of the case? And that circles back to intent. You can only judge kids, and you can only process them based on what they did, not why you think they did it. Now, that might be a mitigating factor, but you got to be careful on that intent stuff. You've got to be really careful on that when you're doing kids. I've always advocated that the first time, give them the minimum. That keeps you pretty safe legally. Even though you might think they deserve more, whatever the consequence is, don't give them the maximum the first time out. That doesn't leave you a lot of room there. You run out pretty quickly. If it's a particularly heinous, a bad one, you might want to go a little more. But a good rule of thumb is start out at the lowest level and work your way up. The night that we cover EC, we'll talk about this case again, and we'll look at it through the lens of what if Bobby had been an EC kid? How would that have changed this? But we intentionally did not do that. Anybody have any questions on tonight? Y'all did a great job. There's a lot of pieces in this. There's a lot of things that we're going to cover more in depth as the semester goes. This first case brings a lot of the different factors of school law into, and I don't expect you to know them all yet, but it opens your eyes to, oh, wait a minute. You've got to develop, and this is kind of my benediction here, and I'll let Dr. Maraglia close. You got to develop a sixth sense of, this don't sound exactly right. Maybe I better call somebody. Now, when Dr. Jordan and I teach this course together, she swears that it was Dr. Dre, but I think it was Snoop that said, in famous words, if you don't know, you better ask somebody. That's school law in a nutshell. If you don't know, you better ask somebody that does. But you've got to develop that sense of, I'm not sure about this. I don't know about this. Kayla's talking about she's in her first 2 years as an AP. Sometimes you don't know. You better ask. It's better just to stop, pause, just like if you're in an EC meeting and you're the LEA rep, and you will be as the new assistant principal, because nobody wants to do that. If you don't know the law, it's okay to pause and stop and ask somebody. Same thing in disciplinary instances and things like this. If you don't know, stop. That's much more acceptable than getting it wrong and then having to go to court and try to defend it. So if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Dr. Maraglia, your final thoughts on the evening.
Well, I just want to remind everyone to make sure that you submit your PowerPoints. I know a couple of you already have, so just don't forget to do that. And also don't forget to do your reflection on this first case study and your group processes and your group experience. So that's just a reminder there. But I agree with Dr. Lamb. I think for your first one out of the gate, you did an excellent job. And I like how usually when I do this, I always have a few folks that are like, oh, you got to support the teacher. You got to support the teacher. And I'm glad that you guys were able to see that she was in the wrong. And you have to decide, where is my line? What is my standard and what can I not tolerate? But great. I know it was a long night, but great job.
We usually take 2 hours on these. We got done in an hour and 20 minutes. We did great tonight. We'll get faster as we go, but you see how the process works. The first team, we work through it as we go. The second one, if they have any additional points, we hear that. And so again, now next time Group B will go first, and you'll get the whipping that Group A got tonight. And then we'll continue to rotate. But it was pretty bloodless tonight. I wasn't too bad tonight, but because y'all did a great job, y'all really did. You were thoughtful. You got together, you talked it out, you were thoughtful. And that's all we can ask, is that you try to be thoughtful, that you put some time and intellectual effort into these cases. You'll learn more from this than anything else you'll do. I told you, this is about how you run a school. This is day-to-day operations. And that's what you need. You have the academic and research background. Now you need to learn how to run a school, and what's important. And again, on the academic side, you'll have more issues over grading than anything else.
And I feel like all the case studies are very relevant. Every one of these case studies, you could have a very similar situation that you have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody have anything else for the good of the group tonight? Give yourself a hand. You did a great job tonight. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Have a good night.